Thousands of Kenyans gathered on Saba Saba, or 7/7 Day, this weekend to honor the nearly 70 people who have died since political protests began last month. The commemoration included masses at various churches around Nairobi, followed by a memorial concert. President William Ruto is facing mounting pressure as long-simmering tensions continue to pour into the streets. Ruto was forced to scrap an unpopular tax bill as a result, and now the Gen Z-led protests are demanding even more change. The Catholic Church in Kenya is asking leaders not to ignore the protests. Here with analysis of the protest movement in Kenya is Ebenezer Obadare, a senior fellow for Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Ebenezer, good to be with you today. Can you explain the evolution of the protests and political unrest in Kenya over the past few weeks?
Thank you. I can do that very quickly. So the protest started as a protest against what you call the finance bill, which was President Ruto proposing this bill that will increase taxes on ordinary Kenyans. But it's not just the idea of increasing taxes, it was the very items that were on that bill. Government was proposing to increase taxes on sanitary pads, on mobile phone services, on motor vehicles, on all those things that would touch the lives of average Kenyan. And people did not like that because of the mismatch that they saw between the burden that the ordinary Kenyan was being expected to carry and the life of privilege, opulence, and profligacy that President Ruto and members of his cabinet and the National Assembly in Kenya were perceiving to live.
Now, Ebenezer, it's been written that Kenya's protests mark a generational revolution in the country's politics. Do you agree with that statement?
I do. I think it's partly correct. So this has been called the Occupy Parliament protest, but it's also been rightly called the Gen Z protest. Gen Z meaning people born between 1997 and 2012. So if you and 2002. So if you look at that, these are people who are just coming of age. Many of them voted for the first time for President Ruto in the elections that were held 2 years ago. Many of them are very savvy in their use of TikTok. Kenya, by the way, has the highest number of TikTok users relative to population in the world. So these are people who know their way around the social media, and they've made their voices felt in a way that members of the older generation, the previous generation, would not have imagined.
Well, keeping in mind that the original protest successfully stopped the tax bill, what's next for this movement? Will President Ruto be forced to step down, or could he pass meaningful legislation to appease these protesters?
I don't think we're at the stage of stepping down yet. I don't actually think many of the protesters want that. That seems to have been tacked on later in the protest. But what many of them wanted, I think they may have actually gotten, which was to have their fears, their anxieties, and their grievances conveyed directly to the Kenyan president. If you know that 2 days ago, the president actually had a meeting on Facebook with the protesters. 150,000 people showed up. A lot of harsh words were exchanged. President Ruto had to bow to the will of the people. He was calling them my brother, my sister, and they exacted very concrete concessions from him. So to that extent, you could say that the protesters have succeeded.
A significant digital revolution. Thank you so much, Ebenezer, Council on Foreign Relations. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.